Eric,
Yeah, hi Sam.
how goes?
It goes. I don't know where it goes. I don't know where the world's going now.
Well, we talked about the Olympics a little bit yesterday.
Okay.
I don't know if you were there the day I was questioning the ethics of the Olympic Committee and disappointed. Actually, am I recording? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you
I'm
are.
recording.
You are. I
Yeah,
haven't
but
been following it. Just hear little bits on the news, but I haven't been
yeah,
following it at all.
me neither. So I expressed a little bit of, I guess, amazement and consternation that a volleyball player convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl was allowed to play on the Netherlands volleyball team,
Mhm.
and that the Chinese had bullied the Olympic committee to relax their drug testing standards, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, crazy stuff.
So
S-
I'm
Yeah,
not following it closely.
yeah, it's just like Israel, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Olympics, same thing.
Yeah, Israel, they went through,
Ugh.
what was it, a Holocaust, a genocide, and now what's happening? Where do I turn on
And
all my AI stuff? Yeah.
that's what's worrying is Iran and the US. What could happen there? What could go wrong?
It could be grim.
I saw a recent YouTube video about China, and all the fuss and attention has been around China attacking Taiwan. But it turns out, from their standpoint, they have much more land to gain, resource to gain, a much easier time of it, all those different logistical factors, if they just move north into Siberia. Russia is distracted. There's a lot of resources there. There's almost, no defenses there. A lot of a lot of reasons for China to, expand if that's really what they want. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting little video.
Yeah, there was a story on public radio yesterday about the Arctic being sort of the new frontier for um, claiming land and developing land. And the Arctic is basically uninhabited and potentially has a lot of resources.
Yeah, if you can get under the ice, right?
Yeah, I don't really know technically how far north countries claim ownership of uninhabited Arctic lands. At what point, I mean, first of all, a lot of the Arctic is just frozen sea. There's not actually any land. So at what point does it actually have to be land, under the ice to be considered claimable?
No,
I don't know.
anything that could be mined or extracted has
Yeah,
value. Like this quintillion, quadrillion dollar, gold asteroid or comet that's somewhere out there in the universe.
although basically, if you find a hoard, an asteroidal hoard or something, suddenly the value of it drops dramatically because it's
If
not
you can get
supposed
to
to.
it economically,
Yeah, and that's the issue is whether or not you can extract it
right?
economically. There's
Well,
also a lot of stuff on the ocean floor that's potentially mineable.
oh yeah, but also it's hard to get down there.
Yeah.
You
Although maybe with, modern robots,
Yeah,
reach
we,
that frontier.
we just tokenize everything. So you want a piece of the Arctic, it's a token. You want a piece of the ocean floor, here's another token.
that's. In fact, I was talking weeks ago about getting an official title from the UK, getting an official lord title by buying a 1 square foot by 1 square foot, plot of land.
Nice.
Tokenize that. They should be all over that.
That's really ego, isn't it?
It's the ultimate vanity, right? Yeah. So yesterday we let things flow, and so we hit the Olympics. We hit a number of different topics. Um, Today I have something that I thought I would ask if you guys are interested, unless you guys want
But
to, bring up other topics.
I don't really have anything that's burning issue.
Go ahead.
You know, um, I go on a long time thematic uh direction, which is to try and be a proponent of scientific method, of rational thinking, of critical thought, of model-based thinking, all of that. But I'm thinking at the fundamental base of it, there's still a big misunderstanding about the scientific method. I hear the scientific community demeaned in a number of ways. Hey, they are people, they are corruptible, some of them. Um, but I think people cannot distinguish, it seems, in general, between the scientific method versus those scientists that are being paid by this company or that special interest. So I think there's a disability in the general case to distinguish the two. The practice, the, push for truth versus the people who are trying to practice, who have to get paid, who are influenced by human influences. And I think that there's a devaluation of science when this misunderstanding is allowed to propagate and not be corrected. So that was one thing that I've always been trying to do in the last 7 years, which I don't think I've ever actually explicated to this level. So it doesn't have to be a long conversation, but I just thought that was one theme that was on my mind.
Yeah.
Is that
I'm curious, do you see a time when this started to change? Like if you go back to like Carl Sagan 50 years ago, I would say I grew up with that as fact. And then something happened. I don't know when.
I think it started even before that, in my opinion.
Galileo often gets the credit for introducing the foundations of the scientific method, in particular, the role of falsification as a key aspect of the scientific method. And I think a lot of people don't get falsification. I mean, look, you got this election in Venezuela, and they're trying to falsify the reported outcome because reported outcomes claim to be bogus. And by the way, this weekend's edition of Hidden Brain on public radio with Shankar Vedantum is all about the search for truth and the elimination of falsehoods. So if you want to listen for that for an hour, it's up on the internet. I think we're very poor. The general public is very poor at falsification, discarding bogus misinformation,
Well,
disinformation.
even before we get there, uh, before we even talk about whether they can do some skill X, there's a misappreciation, underappreciation of needing to do X as part of a truth-seeking process.
Yeah.
You can't say you don't do X. They'll just say, why is X important? Okay. And we say, well, X is important because here's how you use it to get to the truth. Okay. You look at evidence, you look at reasoning, you look at conclusions, you look at, whether or not you've jumped various logical gaps, et cetera, et cetera. But if you just say, oh, you can't do falsification, it's like, so what? What's that in the bigger scheme of things? Okay. So that fundamental understanding of what that process is and why it's important to get the truth is, again, the gap, in my opinion. Now, there's a different gap, which is truth itself. It's not even valued, right? If you're after power, if you're after influence, then truth is malleable. Truth is a tool to be used. But if you're a scientist, if you're an educator, if you're trying to, help civilization become more sustainable, more thrivable, et cetera, then truth is paramount. And you try and build systems and practices and communities that align with the truth, in my opinion. So I think this gap between whether you're going after power versus whether you're going after truth is a fundamental one. And right now we have very few people who are going after truth. And almost everyone is going after power because power represents assets, influence, money, resources, reputation, ability to produce progeny. All of that is represented by power. None of that really is represented by truth, except in the grand scheme of things. See, if you take a microcosm power is more important. In the macrocosm, to me, truth is more important. So that is where my head is at right now.
In classical science, one of the frontiers is the measurement problem. If you want to test a theory, you have to be able to measure the state against a prediction. And if measurement is challenging, then it's unresolvable. And in politics, getting evidence is really confounded by the practice of either hiding the evidence or revealing incorrect information, misinformation, disinformation. So the measurement problem, which sort of has a sharp definition in science, has a very fuzzy characteristic in politics and human affairs. How the hell do you measure the evidence that sorts out truth from falsehood? Who's a reliable source and who's an unreliable source?
Evidence is only important to those who seek truth. See, if you've already got power and people who support you believe you, they don't need evidence. We see that in spades in the MAGA movement.
And that's an unsustainable practice for a culture that wants to have a future.
That's what I mean. In the macrocosm, that doesn't work. In the microcosm, for a specific individual retaining power or a regime, it works great.
Yeah. But it has a long-term downside, and that's the issue, is that, where your grandchildren or great-grandchildren suffer the consequences of fooling ourselves in the current epoch.
Right. So this is where history, I think, is important. If we understand history, we understand these influences. If we devalue history and we basically just rip apart the educational system, you don't focus on history, you don't focus on civics, you don't focus on the Constitution, you don't focus on past conflicts and why they happened and why they persist or how one got resolved. If you eliminate all of that understanding and you say, oh, that's not important. All that's important is, you buy your next iPhone. All that's important is, sign up for Netflix, family version. Okay. If that's all we stress and people don't get a fundamental history that gives them this perspective, then they're easily influenced. They're not educated. They don't know how to question. They don't know how to even think. They don't even evaluate statements. If we knew how to evaluate statements, we would not have a media that just accepts whatever blowhard says. There used to be a day when blowhards, when they lie, they'd be called on it and they'd be, their airtime would be shut off. When's the last time I saw that happen? Over.
Henry Ford famously once said, history is bunk. I think he sort of maybe changed his mind later in life, but there is a lot of bunkum in his story. And so the history is full of his story, his version, which isn't the objective truth. It's slanted in favor of the writer of the account. And there's a real problem in evaluating historical accounts to determine what's reliable and what's unreliable.
That's if you accept one book as authoritative for history. Most historians will accept multiple sources. They go to the actual multiple different sources and try and do the triangulation to say, what is likely true, what is not likely true.
If you can find and decode the accounts in the losers' languages, because those books tend to get burned or lost.
Well, look at what you can put together. You can look at the newspaper reportings. If they had newspapers on a daily basis, you can see the trends. And more importantly, you can see what's not being reported.
Yeah.
Why is this not being reported, X, Y, Z? Okay. Or why is this trend continuing? Okay. So you can still plot all of those things and put together multiple different sources rather than relying on a single one.
But the stuff that they teach you in grammar school, middle school, high school is probably not the most reliable version.
But it's a start, right? It's a start to why do you think this is even interesting or important? Why is it interesting that we don't live in villages? Why is it interesting that we have to have a representative government? Why does taxation even exist? What is eminent domain? Yeah. What is separation of powers? What are checks and balances?
And then there's the issue that is, if you knew all that stuff, could you still earn a living? Could you still have a trade where you could earn a living? You know, that kind of liberal arts education is nice, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to earn a living.
Now, I'm not saying exclusively focus on that, but it needs to be sprinkled in, definitely sprinkled in, with whatever else you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It
one of my
used to,
very good friends from high school, who's a lawyer now, he's an attorney. He's been that way for over 40 years. And it's surprising. He said the best course he ever took in high school was 5 years of Latin. 5 years of Latin gave him perspective on some of these principles that are now still practiced in law, that are the basis of, etymology, as Barry often points out, basis of, some of the common sayings, common wisdoms that people say, that gives them a perspective very few people have. Now, I didn't take Latin, but I appreciate how he described it.
You know,
I went,
there's certain power in etymologies and word origins and semiotics, but it's a bit arcane. It's a bit academic.
Very much depends on the teacher.
Yeah.
when I was in high school, there were exams, Regents exams for graduating high school. And there was a standard of, you had to know US history, world history, and you had to pass these exams. These days, I think the exams are more state curriculum standards, whatever they're trying to do. So there's been a change, and yeah, you're seeing the effects of it. So yeah, how do you get back to valuing these critical thinking standards more? Because I had teachers who would challenge us, picking topics in history, really challenging us to think it through on both sides of the issue and have debates with each other on it. So.
Yep. So, two questions. One, how do you get somebody with huge national influence, and I'm talking about, some orange idiot, who does not understand the Constitution, okay? But that's only the first part of the question. Second part of the question is, why do we get 70 or 80 million people who don't even understand that he does not understand? Because they're not given the education to say, oh, this guy's an idiot. Oh, I know what's in the Constitution. This guy is just flat out wrong. There's 70 or 80 million people who can't even do that. That's how badly our educational system is faltered. And I got to admit, when I first got here to the United States, when I was 5, I started learning about things. All the feedback I saw in school, the positive feedback was reserved for the popular, the good-looking, the athletic. No positive feedback ever went to people who did well in academics, other than those small little worlds like the spelling bee or small little worlds like, the math contest. But that was not a general school population event.
Where does the money for the school come from? Government funding. You get government funding if you have a good football team. I don't know.
No, it doesn't. Not in the elementary level,
Yeah.
but certainly in the college level,
Mhm.
it comes from, those alumni and those tickets and those endorsements and those, what is it? When you actually give money, bequeathing endowments? Yeah, endowments.
Mhm. Yep.
Here's
So
an observation. As far as I can observe, the smartest people are autodidactic.
they have to learn how to be, but that's not the only way.
But they manage to become autodidactic and therefore gain deep insight that's uncommon in the general public.
What did it for me was having a personal computer to play around with in my teenage years and do my own experiments. As I'm learning math in high school, I'm writing geometry programs, trigonometry, calculus, doing my own thing with it. So I guess that you could call that autodidactic.
I got to get someone to drink. I'll be right back.
Yeah, go ahead.
know, but if you sort of zoom out to the upper atmospheric layer and look down on our population, it doesn't look good. It does not look good. It looks pretty grim.
Yeah. And if you zoom out further, we're just a pale blue dot in the middle of nothing.
And the fact that there's negligible evidence of intelligent life anywhere else in the galaxy is further evidence that that intelligent species, if they arise at all, maybe don't survive for very long.
Hmm.
They gain intelligence, but they lack wisdom.
Their ability to destroy themselves is enhanced faster than their ability to
To know better, to know better, right?
We could go through thousands of years of history and look at
on this
civilizations.
planet, on this very planet. Same thing.
Mhm.
That's why I keep saying, now this particular civilization we're in, can we level up? Are we able to get past that?
In theory, yes,
boundary?
but I wouldn't bet on it.
You got to reach the children and show them a different path somehow.
You have to stop corrupting the children by letting them know that what current adults do is actually the right thing, because they have much more common sense than adults who grew up in this society.
And our culture has certain inherited axiomatic beliefs that are ripe to be overthrown. And there are academics who know that some of the axiomatic foundations are bogus, and they can write about it academically, but these bogus axioms persist indefinitely for thousands of years.
So I'll go back to my original question. To me, it seems like there's an underappreciation for truth, an underappreciation of a process for proceeding to be closer to the truth. And that today, so much is taken without questioning, when even just a little bit of questioning would reveal that it's just bullshit. How much bullshit do we see in media? I'm not even saying regular people. I'm saying the media, who is supposed to be calling out the bullshit, they're spewing the bullshit.
I mean, even in basic science, we know that general relativity is mathematically incompatible with quantum mechanics, and yet in a century we haven't been able to figure out how to reconcile the two. Hi, Caleb.
But that's okay, right? As long as you keep trying, and as long as you keep trying to ask the right questions. Hey, Kayla, how goes it? The question I asked at the beginning, Kayla, was, there seems to be an underappreciation of truth and scientific method, and there seems to be an unquestioned acceptance of bullshit in a huge part of our society. And we talk about how that's evolved through bad education, eroded education, and how people don't even question bullshit. They don't even understand how to even identify bullshit.
And also, it's a matter of degree. You know, there's a maximum in science. All theories are wrong, or all models are wrong, because they're good approximations, but they're only approximations.
Which is fine, but people don't think that's a good thing. They hear that and they say, "Oh, therefore that's bad. Therefore science is bad."
Right.
That's an idiotic conclusion.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point about labeling something as bullshit. It may be a useful model up to a point, but it's hard to know beyond what point not to rely on it. It's only a probability of giving you a good prediction. And then there's going to be those events where the outcome is unexpected. It's a revelation. It reveals the falsehood of something that's taken for granted.
Now, you could model the population of their contacts and where they get their information from. You could see the flow of, say, a tweet and how it flows throughout, and you could get a sense of it. But yeah, like what percentage of the population would you say are in that accepting BS category?
70, 80 million at least.
Yeah, speaking of tweets, this week's episode of Hidden Brain begins with an anecdote that somebody tweeted that a bomb had gone off in the White House and harmed Barack Obama, and the stock market plummeted before the tweet was corrected.
Mm-hmm.
People just believed this tweet without. And by the way, the tweet came from the AP account, but it had been hacked. Somebody had hacked the AP account and posted this tweet, and so it was believed.
Non sequitur. May I inject the thought that just came to me? It happened like 2 weeks ago. We'll get back to this topic if that's okay. We didn't even mention here that Julian Assange is now out of prison.
Yeah.
And I guess his penalty, he had to confess to one charge, and his sentence was reduced to time served. So now he's a free man. I think that's an underappreciated accomplishment for him. Now, he's a very controversial figure, I know. By the books, by the letter of the law, yes, he is a felon. Yes, he is a traitor. But this is why we have to look at a bigger picture.
But he wasn't even an American citizen.
That's right. Where did he do this from? Australia? Someplace like that?
Either Australia or Europe. I don't remember where it was located.
Yeah.
But you can't be a traitor if you're not a citizen of the country.
That's true.
Now, would you say that he felt a higher moral calling to expose this information?
That was his argument. That was his claim.
Yeah, so would you say it's like Kohlberg morality, like a higher level?
And yet this is also dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone, with a deeply religious bent said, hey, the earth is way too populated, I need to get rid of 8 billion people and just leave only 100 million, somebody could believe that quite strongly, right? Yeah. So this is dangerous territory we're on. Let me get the 5 nuclear bombs that the USSR cannot find. Okay, let me set them off in 5 very highly populated cities, and the earth will be a better place. Somebody will actually probably think that.
Well, people have. There are probably, what was the hot zone, the fictional story about a viral, deadly virus? So it doesn't have to be a bomb. It could be
there's a lot of those things.
Biological agent.
Michael Crichton.
Crichton. Yep.
Did he write the hot zone? I couldn't remember who wrote it.
I don't think it was called the hot zone. He wrote some other book.
The Andromeda
Strain. The Andromeda Strain, that one. Yeah. But then there's been various TV shows and episodes and movies about this very thing, about, bioweapons.
Yeah.
So, Eric, you're right. I'm agreeing with you. But it's got to be nuanced because, we could say Assange believes exactly as you say. And if I take my example, it could be equally applied there.
Yeah. Another example is Edward Snowden. So technically what he did was wrong, but did it have a positive effect or not?
And he was a U.S. president. He was a U.S.
Yeah. He hacked into a SharePoint server and he leaked it, essentially. And I remember going to a user group and people talking about it from the perspective of IT. You don't do that. You have too much administrative power. So that's a cut and dry answer. But did he expose the fact that we're all being spied on? And well, I don't know.
You all sort of know that.
Yeah, we didn't have the evidence.
Used to it.
Yeah.
See, I'm guilty of that. Since the 80s, I've known this because since the 80s, I've had these clearances. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm guilty of not exposing that myself. Should I have come forward and said, hey, I know that there are taps that the government has on all of these different internet, transfer points?
Well, from a military perspective, it's a secret, national secret, and that's why you have the clearance. So
yes,
you have to look at it in different perspectives. So the pure law versus the moral. So like if you found something immoral, and you felt so strongly about it, that's a different story. But then how do you know it's your judgment versus the commander-in-chief's judgment?
Yeah.
Part of the requirements of a secret clearance is you have to promise to report any observation, evidence, or suspicion that somebody else is leaking stuff. It's not that you have to take the government secrets to your grave. That's not a problem. It's that you have to expose anybody else who might not be. You know, you have to be an unpaid cop.
So should every person in the country be tattling on people next door?
Yeah, and that was the one thing that I found most objectionable about a secret clearance, is that requirement.
And that's
I
what
said to
happened
Mike, I
in
said,
Germany.
I'll take your secrets to my grave, but don't ask me to be a cop on behalf of the government for everybody else who's got a secret clearance.
If you look at
I don't want that responsibility.
this is what happens. It happened in Gestapo Germany. It happened in Taiwan. It's happening in China. You know, in China, in every intersection, there's 4 cops. One at each quadrant of that intersection.
Yeah,
Not
spy
cops,
versus
actually.
spy.
They don't have cops. They're just members of the army.
Yeah.
Every intersection, every major intersection, 4 cops, minimum. All watching the people. It's a different society than what we're used to. But that level of repression, this, hey, did your dad say something about XYZ? And then to go to mom, did your mom say something about, were they talking about this particular event? Did they use this particular word? And they're talking to the children.
There's a lot of features of our legal system that are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Disturbing.
And yet this is the greatest country on earth?
I don't think so. We certainly don't have
been for some
population.
Yeah,
It's an
Kayla,
experiment.
what's your view? We haven't heard from you. Maybe we're just too ranty. I'm
Yes,
always
you're too ranty, but that's okay. I was just thinking in my head, it must be exhausting to babysit everybody.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you expect people to do the right thing, right? But then if you don't give them opportunities for the basic necessities like safety, your basic needs getting met,
Well, I'll agree with you
then it's
one
just
way. I'll expect everybody to do what they think is the right thing.
some people think that stealing is the right thing because they don't have any money to provide for themselves.
The kids are starving. Yeah, let's go get some food.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the perspective of people coming up from the border, that they could find rationalizations for stealing.
I think this is just an ongoing battle, and it has been since the beginning of time, but it's kind of gotten exacerbated because capitalism just doesn't really give people an opportunity to really, we really don't have an opportunity to make something for ourselves. Sure, we can, have money to buy groceries, buy a house. But I think in the heart of everything, people just want to contribute. They want to feel heard. They want their basic necessities met. And capitalism is just doing us dirty with all of that because now it's an imbalance of power, the haves and the haves not. And, we all know what happens when people get too greedy, right? They make poor decisions. And then if those are the leaders that we see, if those are the people that we respect, then, we want to be like them. Yeah. And we want to, morally just cast aside what we think is right for some pocket change. So it's definitely the system, but how are you going to undo that? How are you going to, try to convince people that, I don't know, their lives matter? Not their entire moral fabric matters. How are we going to do that? How are we going to give people voices? Everybody is fucking talking and nobody isn't shutting up. Then there are people who are like, well, we need our voices to be heard, but do you have anything of value to say? Those are the thoughts on my mind. Over.
May I?
It's your turn.
So if you guys like Buckminster Fuller, he said, don't try to fix the system, create a better system, right?
Yep.
So years ago, and I haven't created it, but here's the thought. I registered an internet domain. I think it was called Eighth Continent, eighthcontinent.info or eighthcontinent.something. I forget what the TLD was, but it was a letter 8, TH continent. And I thought, okay, so let's suppose if the Earth were so huge that all of a sudden we just discovered that there was another continent out there that we'd not yet set foot on, in addition to 7 that we already know. What would we do to set up a whole brand new society and system and, utilize those resources in a way that hopefully avoids all the mistakes of all the other civilizations on those previous 7 continents? But if we take a look at cyberspace as potentially that 8th continent, then what could that look like? This is fundamentally the question that Doug Engelbart was asking in the 60s and 70s. Was once we create this whole networked space of people, what do we set up as our interaction models, our communication models, our resource management, our information exchange, our decision processes, our ways of transacting and delivering and receiving value, all those sort of things. Those are the fundamental questions. Now, all of those have taken many, many, many steps since then. But the question still remains, is there a way to think about cyberspace as an 8th continent? Or do we just bring into that space all the stuff, all the mistakes that we already have from what we do today without realizing that it's a different kind of space? Now, if you take a look at the Ethereum people, the Bitcoin people, they're trying to take advantage of cyberspace in a brand new way that was not possible in physical space. Some of those I think are still misguided, but they're trying. So trying to put together something on an 8th continent is an interesting question. And this stuff that I've been trying to do since 2005 has been trying to ask these questions and trying to find people who would like to create this. This is, Eric, the extrapolation of a thing that starts from a DKR, but then grows and grows and grows and grows and grows.
Right. Okay. One useful model is like looking what happens when there's a disaster and how people come together. And a lot of the blockchain stuff that there are good things that have supported people, finding people in a disaster area, getting food to the right places, getting medics into the right places, resource management. So that's a starting point. And I think Cory Doctorow's book Walk Away was inspired by Rebecca Solnitz's books because she's done research on disaster, what happens that people suddenly focus on what's important in life, just making sure everybody's okay. And then, how do you get back rebuilding? And then, how do you feed everybody? I think that's fundamental, like getting back to the land, the soil, and that has to happen. And maybe Buckminster Fuller had some ideas there. I'm sure permaculture came out of that. So until you get people buying into that this is how these are the fundamentals and the values of life, and that people, because like when the Pilgrims came here, they had to make peace with the Indians and then start. They had a lot of problems too, but they had to have a community that was cohesive enough and the leadership to negotiate with their neighbors.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying is like I think people just want to be able to be of value, of service. And during disasters, you see it because, hey, I can finally help. I can contribute. I can do something fantastic.
In the early 1990s, the eighth continent concept, we didn't call it that, but the innovation of online learning communities in cyberspace with governance models, unlike traditional governance models, for example, the social contract, self-governing community. Now, they were small demonstration projects. They never exceeded more than a few hundred participants, but yeah, well, that's exactly what we did, is create new communities, new virtual communities in the early 90s, before the internet went commercial, public.
Yeah, those were great. And you had a smaller scale and you were able to work out those governance models.
Exactly.
You didn't have millions of people. That's the point. So you need a different model when it scales up.
It didn't scale. That was the problem. It was not a scalable
Right.
model.
It couldn't have scaled, but you had something that worked for maybe 100.
But it was like the Amana colonies in Iowa. It was a small, self-contained community of a modest number of people who could all agree on a governance model that was,
Yeah, and people had stake in it. That they had something, skin in the game. That they want something, and these other people want similar things, and they'll figure it out. Yeah.
You guys remember UUCP and Usenet?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you remember how proposals were circulated and how they were decided and how elections worked?
Proposal and all that stuff. Yeah. RFPs.
RFC.
But do you remember how the election and decision-making process worked? Yes, RFCs are crucial to that, but
sort of a consensus model, I think, something.
Specifically what? If you don't know who's a member of that community, how do you hold an election? That was the interesting question that they solved.
But in those days, people didn't have anonymous IDs in the early days, the late 80s, early 90s.
Might as well have been. They're very cryptic. Do you remember Usenet email paths?
Oh, yeah.
There was no DNS back then.
Yeah, bang paths.
Bang paths.
Right.
When bang meant something else.
Yeah. Yes. The address was the route through the network.
So how did they do elections, or how did they come to consensus?
They would circulate an RFC. They would then hold elections. People would actually say yes or no. But there had to be a ratio of yeses to nos, and then there had to be a duration beyond which there was some settling time. They had to allow the settling time. So they say, okay, looks like there's not going to be any new fundamental, opinion or, surge, in the election trends. So they could actually say, okay, this is decided. And I don't know the specifics, but all I know is they had to wait, depending on the size of the community. If it was 3 or 4 of us, we could decide immediately, right? If it was 500 people, you'd probably have to allow a week, maybe a few days. If it was 50,000, you'd probably have to have a much longer period. So there was definitely a practice that Usenet came up with when you don't know who's in that community. There's no citizenship that they actually, had to check first, right? You didn't even know whether somebody was a bot. Now, there weren't bots in those days, but, you didn't know whether somebody was using multiple different accounts. So I think those lessons and those practices could be examined. We can learn something from those.
When there's trust, it's easy. When people game the system and you have to put in more security and everything else, that's where it gets gummy, gums up, it works.
Yeah. That's what happened.
One of my stupid decisions I made early in my life was I didn't choose to go deeply into crypto and internet security. I knew that was a bottomless pit. And I chose to do other things, but now it's actually, crucial to everything that's done on the internet.
Yep.
CrowdStrike, for example.
Yeah, so CrowdStrike gets all the corporations to sign up with them, and we don't even know they have a vulnerability in Microsoft. I found out it was all zeros that was passed And there's no check for all zeros.
Anytime you introduce a single point of failure, that failure point is going to fail at some point.
Yep.
Either it's discovered and exploited or it happens happenstantially.
Well, you could imagine a conspiracy where somebody made them put out that patch.
This is why, one of the fundamental ideas behind all the Ethereum and Bitcoin ledger stuff is no single point of failure. It comes at an expense.
Yes.
Huge expense.
But the energy expense is problematic. It's very problematic.
Yeah. And I think what we don't yet know is with quantum computers, like right here, right at the cusp, you hear IBM making a lot of noise about this, Google, Facebook, all these, right there, all the work that's been done in crypto could just evaporate.
Theoretically.
Yes.
I mean,
potentially.
practically to do all that. Yeah, if they find a code-breaking algorithm in quantum, I'm not sure how easy it would be to take any random key and decode it.
But the fact that it does it in a quantum method says it's an orders of magnitude. I mean, just a whole.
Well, if you compare it to how Turing cracked Enigma, it was because of a phrase that was repeated through every message. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a headline yesterday that a quantum computer had solved the traveling salesman problem using a quantum computer with 1 qubit.
Yeah, and the big ones
that's scalable.
They have the ones that are being built now have over 1,000 qubits, don't they?
Yeah, but they also have this decoherence problem of how many steps can you take before you've ruined your calculation with too much decoherence.
Yeah, error correction is still a problem.
It's really an unsolved engineering problem.
Temperature management
may never be solved. It may never become quantum supremacy, except in sort of very niche applications which are not interesting.
What I find interesting, like our current error correction codes, it was Richard Hamming having inspiration in a taxi that got him to think of the method of doing error correction. It's like a rare thing, inspiration like that. And the perspiration to work through the rest of it.
Well, any insight you could say is instantaneous, isn't it?
Yeah. But
I mean,
if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't have easy error correcting codes and things like CDs and transmission. Yeah, we would still be behind the curve.
Well, if Mendeleev hadn't seen a pattern and laid out the periodic table, then we wouldn't have that level of understanding about valences.
Yep.
So every insight comes.
They're rare. They're very rare, and they come from people of genius quality thinking.
And thinking long enough and deeply enough about a particular problem in ways that other people cannot think about it.
Yeah, if they put in enough of the work in advance, the insight will come at some point. Yeah.
Like the guy that solved Fermat's theorem, Andrew Weil. Didn't he work for like 28 years or something like that?
Ridiculous amount of
Some
time.
number of years before he actually solved that problem.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't know how the brain does everything. It's just the way that this insight just comes in. It's still a mystery. And
that was one reason why I didn't get an A in philosophy class. I tried to explain that process, and the professor said, not good enough. But I got a plus.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, explaining creativity is hard.
Yeah, I mean, you can begin with the concept of hybrids. Taking two things which are considered disparate and hybridizing them is a very powerful concept, but it's not easy to find a new opportunity to hybridize. Once you hybridize something, then it's sort of, oh yeah, now I get it. But
so the question I go back to is, is it meaningful to even ask the question, how do we shift a population from blindly accepting whatever the loudest person says, or the richest person says, or the tallest person says, or the best looking person says? How do we shift from that to some value and appreciation for truth and, understanding the way things work, understanding the universe, understanding our very basic natures, as opposed to just accepting on blind authority?
One funeral at a time.
Pretty morbid.
That's was it Max Planck who said that? I can't remember which of the physicists.
One of those guys in the early
Passes one
1900s.
funeral at a time.
But when you have
Going back to Eric's question then, is it a good thing and moral thing for us to arrange more funerals?
No, you just have to wait for them to happen.
Do we have the time? Can we survive in the meantime?
Promoters of the dying theories die off, and then the theories die off.
or how about you
I mean, look at how long it took to overthrow Aristotle wrote stuff that almost everything was eventually debunked.
Mm.
But it took until, Galileo's time to begin debunking a lot of Aristotle's stuff.
Yeah.
That's not the problem, though. The problem is if you accept it without question.
Don't know what question to ask. If you know what question to ask and you can survive asking it, more power to you. But a lot of times you either can't come up with the question or you get shouted down for the temerity of asking it.
But now you could ask AI, what question should I ask before?
Yeah, but does it know?
No, well, it knows all the books in the world,
I
right?
know a lot of
It knows
questions you could ask, but
all the
not
question
the
patterns.
question.
It knows all the question patterns. It can
Okay.
give you the question patterns. So even before you ask, there's the very simple one of, is this true? Or the second one, which is, are there cases where this is not true? It's a good way to start.
I've done it the other way around. I've asked ChatGPT questions in a Socratic style, leading it to construct a thesis, which is not a commonly appreciated thesis. But I published those chats and they disappear into the ether.
Okay. I think getting information about like biographies of people is useful, and seeing how they acquired their reasoning. So like I try to learn about biographies of historical figures or technical people, and try to get a sense of how they learned, what their environment was growing up, and what led to their thinking. And then we have to, at some point, make a judgment internally based on what we know.
But a lot is just perspiration. Just look at lots and lots of possibilities and rule out the ones that are, baloney. And that's just a lot of work. A lot of it's just perspiration.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of people just make decisions based on their intuition without doing enough background.
They pick, a likely possibility and live with it because that's all the best they can do. They can't compute the optimum, so they pick a likely one.
And that's how you explain creativity right there.
Can you repeat that for me, please?
I remember you said that it's hard to explain creativity. I think it does come from kind of an intuitive process within yourself, and you just go by that.
So how is it explained? And maybe it's not possible. How is it explained in a way that's repeatable?
It may not be.
Like, I want to be creative right now. How do I be creative right now?
It's an individual thing.
You take two totally different ideas and mash them up and see what you get. There'll be something new in there.
But the number of combinations that don't yield anything are astronomical.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's a process of perspiration. Try everything that doesn't work until you find the light bulb.
Assuming that you live long enough.
Yeah. Like my son wants to act. He is talented But he lacks the work ethic to be able to do that, and partially because he is only 13. But at the same time, there are other 13-year-olds who work harder than he does, who are just as talented. But the creative process within to try to encourage himself to excel is something that I cannot teach him. I feel like there's a creative process to everything.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
There are some DVDs where the actors talk at the end about their process of acting, and listening to that and hearing all the reasoning they go through to get the emotion for a scene. It really is a lot of work. And I had a college roommate who studied acting, and he would come back complaining, they're making me read Strasbourg and all these stupid exercises I have to do, you know, but that's the way it is if you're serious about that as a career.
You want to get to Carnegie Hall, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, practice being a rock or whatever this stupid exercise was.
A tomato.
Yeah, right.
It's Al Pacino. Best tomato I can possibly be.
I took acting in my senior year, and it was a good thing.
So if this has run its course, I don't want to pound it to death. I have other questions.
I'm curious about your questions, your other questions.
Well, let me just feed it with a meme because I enjoy this meme. Let me copy this here and paste it into the chat. It's kind of related. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson with a t-shirt. You guys have the screens? You can see this?
Yeah, I see it now.
To disprove evolution, why not report your findings and collect your Nobel Prize?
Nice. Wasn't there an intelligent design theory years ago that tried to disprove evolution?
Oh, yeah. There was a famous court case, I think in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was
a school book.
Can they teach intelligent design or not? Yeah.
They had changed the term. They'd introduced intelligent design as a synonym for what synonym did they replace? The one that was against the law. I can't remember now the term that they replaced. As a cut and paste replacement.
Was it like a religious thing?
It was a religious term. Maybe it might have been creationism or something. I think it was replacement for creationism, intelligent design. And then it went to trial for years in Pennsylvania. And famous case that finally got revealed to be a cut and paste of an original document. That was the revelation, that it wasn't an original document. They had taken this theological treatise of creation and just did a cut and paste and introduced intelligent design as a synonym.
So they could feed that to ChatGPT, create a new version of it now. Yeah, right. Yeah, so why did it take so long?
I guess because the defense or whoever had to find this original theological document that was from some theological source in Texas.
Okay, so if you had a DKR and you could trace it right back to the guy in Texas, you would have saved a lot of time and money, right?
This is really before the time when you could just do today almost anybody can do a internet search and find out information that would have taken a lifetime to do, 50 years ago.
But wasn't that like the 90s when this was happening?
I think it might have been in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of the time when I was pretty old by then. I was at least a teenager. When I first encountered the word concordance in the context of a Bible, I said, wow, somebody spent a lot of time doing this. Imagine now that could be done in like 0.001 milliseconds with machines these days. And yet that was valuable back then. And people who study, I guess, the Bible would have an appreciation for that time spent.
And ChatGPT could look at all the Bibles and write a new one that makes sense for everybody, right?
Thomas Jefferson wrote his own version of the Bible. He did a kind of a cut and paste and editing. I mean, if you want to do a treatise on ethics or ethical best practices, that's really kind of doing the same thing, turning it into a secular treatment of the same general concept of providing guidance for living a successful, healthy, rewarding life. How to live the good life and not end up in prison.
Well, we'd just say that the stories in the Bible were geared toward family life, that patriarchal survival of the family, across generations.
Yeah. A lot of it was wisdom, the development of nuggets of wisdom, that the best practice isn't the obvious practice, and the wisdom was supposed to direct you toward prudent options instead of imprudent ones that were going to be good in the short term and bad in the long term. And that model-based reasoning about what's going to be what's the long-term downsides, that's not an easy thing to work out if you don't have depth in scientific model-based reasoning for human socio-political behavior patterns.
Psychohistory.
I mean, a lot of that has become increasingly secular, especially in recent times. And the secular versions, you can go to Harvard and take, course in theories of justice or ethics or whatever. And it's not based on faith. It's based on a kind of a calculus, analytical calculus. But that's very advanced, deep reasoning.
It doesn't need to be.
You can go back and just do it based on Father Knows Best.
You can actually explain it to a 5-year-old without having to bring in religion.
Up to a point. But how do you explain that the model of the downsides is something you should believe this model? The model basically is handed down on stone tablets from Father Knows Best.
I think we're shortchanging 5-year-olds.
Well, maybe. Can a 5-year-old falsify a model by giving a counterexample? I mean, when do you learn counterexamples? It's sort of high school, right? Prove the theorem or provide a counterexample.
Yeah, teach GitHub to 5-year-olds so then they could put their reasoning out there. We can help them along.
That gets back to falsification. How do you falsify a thesis? How do you find a counterexample that disproves or eliminates a thesis? And that ain't easy. And again, it's the measurement problem. Could you give an example where the measurement is sufficiently objective and reliable to demonstrably falsify something? When there's probabilities involved, that becomes harder and harder to do. And quantum mechanics says you can't get rid of probabilities. They're sort of baked into the architecture of the cosmos.
But isn't it fascinating, like when you go to astronomy, how they could measure things that are just enormous, and just the reasoning they do to get there, like this star is at this point, or time and
you have to find patterns which are very technical.
Yep.
The stars that pulse at a certain rate as a function of their size, and so you can get a measure of distance. That was a pretty fundamental breakthrough.
Yep, and the precision they need in these telescopes.
Very distant objects.
Yeah, they're able to find exoplanets by dimming of starlight and all kinds of other things, but it's really...
And it's probabilistic. You're now
it is.
Working with statistics where you have uncertainties that are the difference between separating two cases and not being able to separate them.
Mhm. Yeah, and they needed all the computer technology to do that since the 50s and 60s.
Look at the gains we got from being able to send probes to the distant planets to get close-up pictures.
Mhm.
Couldn't get it with just an optical telescope. And how much we learned from sending interplanetary probes.
Yeah, and Voyager runs still running Fortran, and they needed to stop talking. They get someone who knows Fortran to talk to it again.
How much memory is on Voyager?
Oh, who knows? Okay.
A few K, yeah.
And
And picking out those very, very weak signals through the noise of deep space is
oh yeah, sure.
Statistical signal detection is just an amazing mathematical breakthrough that once you see it, you go, duh. But before you've ever heard of it, you go, how can they detect a signal that's buried in the noise?
It's Fourier transforms and yeah, then statistics. So we have great minds who could do that, but we can't figure out how to live with our neighbors.
Although, there are people who claim to have figured it out and published guidelines, whether they're secular or theological guidelines, they've published proposals and guidelines and systems, and people either buy into them or they don't.
And we haven't even proven whether those great minds can coexist with other great minds.
Well, yeah, the question is, can you get along with somebody who holds the opposite thesis from you? That's kind of an art that not everybody masters.
So we may have a moon base in the near future. So who would you send to the moon base? Like, can you get a diverse group from different countries? What kind of moral fiber would these people have to have? Or what negotiation skills? Like, you could probably test them on a desert island, see how they survive, and find the best people.
That for decades.
They've been doing that, yeah. But those were like short-term missions. Well, I guess they're studying, what would a Mars colony need or a moon colony?
On the space station, of course, not a big community. It's half a dozen people who maybe spent up to a year.
Yeah, they just exited the biosphere just not long ago, right? There was a whole small crew, 4 to 6 people, I think, spent the year in isolation.
Yeah, there have been a number of those experiments.
Did they just exit, you said?
It was about a week or two ago. I read an article about that.
Yeah, they finally get there.
Now that's something to look at.
Let me see if I can find it.
And they're all alive?
Exactly.
One of them's an android.
All kinds of stress, psychological issues, that they have to sustain.
Let's see.
I mean, the phenomenon that people don't get along is not exactly an obscure phenomenon in our species.
Well, the people signing up for that, they probably had to have qualities of conflict resolution, and probably a lot of testing beforehand.
In conflict resolution, even though there is a theory or model for it, doesn't mean that people will adhere to the protocols. This whole notion of having protocols that are functionally reliable and people will adhere to them, that's a discipline that a lot of people just don't seem to have the ability to wrap their head around protocols and adhere to them.
It's also about building trust.
I found the reference. You guys interested?
Yeah.
The Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analog, CHAPIA, Mission 1, a NASA simulation of a year-long mission to Mars, has successfully concluded. The 4-member crew, consisting of Commander Kelly, Flight Engineer Ross, Medical Officer Nathan, and Science Officer Enka, lived and worked in a 1,700 square foot 3D printed habitat from June 25th, 2023 to July 8th, 2024. Yeah, that was only about, 4 weeks ago. The crew spent 378 days in isolation, the last 12 months simulating a Mars mission, conducted over 1,000 scientific experiments, equipped with life support systems, air recycling, mock Martian terrain. Performance and health data will be analyzed. They don't say much about the psychology of it.
Probably too
In
early
this
to.
summary, they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes time to analyze and make
Also, I don't know whether they'll reveal the psychology except at a very
Publicly.
gross.
Right.
Well, do they have
At
video
least it looks
cameras
like all of them survived and they're still living.
Yeah, that's good. But
Are they still friends?
so yeah, I mean the question is what qualities emerged that let them deal with
Yes.
all the problems.
Yes.
Remember, they were carefully selected in advance.
Yeah, that's the
Likelihood
thing.
of being able to coexist with other people productively, collaboratively, and not in a hostile manner.
Yeah, here.
Antagonistic.
Summary.
Mhm.
I'll send this link. It's a starting point. You can do the search yourself, I'm sure. Where's my chat? Where's my chat window?
Just go down to the bottom and click it again.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, here's the link to one of the articles.
Mhm.
But, I've thought for sure they've done this experiment before.
Well, they have. They've done many versions of it, probably for 20, 30 years, maybe,
That's what I thought. Yeah.
versions of it. Part of it was simply, could you create a habitat that was self-contained? That was the first part.
Yes.
And once you had a technological habitat that was self-contained, then can people get along inside of it? Once you've got one that you can test out the sociology of it.
I mean, when they do a report, it would be interesting to see what they find.
But
And how this compares with earlier reports when of similar experiments.
I mean, the technological part of it, just creating a self-contained habitat, there's probably lots and lots of published data on that.
Yeah, that'll improve over time. It's the question of, how do they form a society? And
The space station has to do that. Submarines have to do. Submarines and space stations have had to do that, for decades. So that part has essentially been solved. There was a funny story about growing tomatoes on the space station, and some tomatoes got lost for a couple of months, and they found them. One of them floated away. You can look up the lost space station tomato.
And if there was a bad actor who stole that tomato and ate it, then what kind of justice system would you have?
Well, that probably was one of the hypotheses that it had been eaten, but it turned out, no, it just got lost and eventually somebody found it.
But it's a good thought experiment. There are critical resources that the society depends on.
Clue me into something. Is it true that there's a crew stranded up there and we're trying to figure out how to get them down?
Yeah, there's two people who went up on the Boeing Starliner.
Yeah.
And now they've got propulsion issues and helium leaks that they haven't been able to authorize that they return. They were only supposed to be there for like 4 days. And they've been there for like a month. So in a sense, they're stranded in the sense that the Starliner capsule is not yet authorized, but they've got 2 more docking stations. So they might send up one of the other technologies eventually if they don't fix the Starliner.
So what actually happened? What was the origin of this crisis? I didn't stay up to date on this.
They tested this Boeing Starliner capsule, which is way over budget and underperforming, had helium leaks and other thruster issues that they never really successfully resolved. after a month. I mean, they managed to get them up there and dock, despite the helium leaks, but now they're afraid to send it back down again with these two people aboard because it doesn't quite meet minimum requirements. So these two astronauts are aboard the space station while they try to figure out, what the next step is. They might just end up sending up one of these other systems to retrieve them.
But that is an example of corporate culture of Boeing versus corporate culture of SpaceX.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Boeing really has lost a lot of cred between their airplanes and the Starliner spacecraft thingy. Didn't live up to standards.
Also got sued
Say,
and lost.
who got sued?
Boeing.
By NASA or by who?
I don't know the lawsuit. I don't know the details. I just saw the headline: Boeing sued, lost the law.
Oh, I think
Millions of
that's for the passenger airplane, I think is what that's about.
And not
Yeah,
just
and there was also a whistleblower that got killed too.
Yeah, or died
Two.
suspicious.
Two. I'm just saying there's a lot of problems with that company. I don't want to look into it because I'm scared.
Well, their quality control criteria kind of subsided to the point where it fell below minimum standards.
Well, maybe they'll get back up on their feet after all this.
Maybe. You don't think so?
no. In fact, I watched a very extensive documentary on how Boeing lost its way. And I believe they were taken over by McDonnell Douglas. And that culture change was fatal. So you can expect, the profit took over quality. The mission was subservient then to profit. And that was the beginning of the end. And which
Yep.
is really too bad because those of us in the Northwest remember when Boeing was like a company to be revered and respected. They did things the right way. They did it with quality. It was the airliner that everybody wanted.
Yeah, when the engineers held the political power instead of the CPAs or the MBAs.
Yeah, and it's a very
Yeah.
good documentary. If I can find the link, I'll see if I can share it.
There's been quite a few stories to that effect, but it looks
Honestly,
good.
the interesting story in the news now is Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI, and they just published a document saying that OpenAI was a competitor of Microsoft.
Used to be.
Let me give you detail. I said there were two people that died. March 2024. This is this year. John Barnett, 62, died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound in Charleston, South Carolina. At the time of his death, he was testifying in his retaliation lawsuit against Boeing. Joshua Dean, 45, in May of 2024, died on Tuesday after a brief illness. He had gone public with concerns about manufacturing defects and quality control problems at Spirit Aerospace Systems, a major supplier of parts for Boeing 737 MAX jets.
Very suspicious. Very suspicious. But you would think that
Recently,
investigations that would resolve the issues there, but instead of leaving them up in the air.
Let's see, that's a breakdown of the quality control system. That really you want this information and you want to improve. But apparently the corporate pressure will
yeah, and I
overrule.
just sent another link, another article. I just haven't read it yet. I just saw it. Boeing faces 10 more whistleblowers after 2 die.
Wow.
So,
But see, that's a very disturbing pattern.
yeah.
And, when you get enough statistics to form a pattern that's not just random, then you begin to suspect foul play. Go ahead, Joshua.
I think I was being subtle with my OpenAI comparison, is that what Sam was saying is that the culture of McDonnell Douglas took over that culture. And I'm saying when you have these weird mergers where they do these things it's a weird thing in business where they try to take a company, but they don't have the money to take it. So they do all these political games inside of boards, and then they buy the people at pennies on the dollar because they devalue the company. There's an actual name for that. It's like a strategy in business. And when you do that, can you imagine what the corporate culture is if one day you're working for OpenAI and then you're working for Microsoft's new AI division and you're trying to split a company apart and compete against each other? And that's what it sounds like with this McDonnell Douglas Boeing situation, where no one's loyal to anyone and everyone doesn't know who to go up the ranks to. And then that culture breaks down, communication breaks down, quality breaks down,
Yeah,
and
the
it's
cultural
hard to
values
do
are tough.
business. Yeah, it's hard to know who am I working for now. Am I working for McDonnell Douglas? Am I working for Boeing? What's going on?
Yeah, cultural values go topsy-turvy,
Yeah.
and that's very disturbing to people who consider the ethics of their value system paramount.
I've
Well,
been through,
hierarchies break down.
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah, I've been through
you don't
several
know.
mergers in my career, and it's always had a big impact.
You know what I'm talking about, Eric, where you're like reporting to the person that you trust for 10 years, and then next thing you know, wait a second, do I trust this person that I'm telling this stuff to?
It's just culture clash, and yeah, maybe we had something better, but they chose the other company's system, so they're decommissioning our system, things like that.
So I just sent the link to the documentary. It's called
Yeah.
Downfall, the case
Okay.
against Boeing.
Hmm.
It is very, very good. It's eye-opening.
Started watching those documentaries, Sam, and I'm afraid to get on a plane. I haven't been on a plane in a year. That's why when I say afraid, I'm afraid like your brain starts working and you start having a panic attack on a plane. I don't want
Well,
that.
for 2 years, I was going from Pacific Northwest down to the Bay Area, right, and various other places, and it would always be Alaska. So this particular route, 99% of the time, was a Horizon um, airplane, and they flew a Brazilian jet. So it was not the 737 any variety. It was a Brazilian that actually was done very, very well. It was not the one. It was not a Brazilian plane that lost its window or lost its door. Those are Boeing, obviously. So I was
Yeah.
avoiding the Boeing 737s on these particular flights.
That story you told me about, you were on that flight with the pilot that was on mushrooms, right?
Yes, that's right. So that was not a physical mechanical failure. That was a human error. That was human breakdown. And that was on the Brazilian airplane.
That's even scarier though. The
Yeah.
human error.
But you know what's also scary? He was being jump seated down to San Francisco, where his next flight, he was the pilot for a 747. He was supposed to fly that the very next day. So if it
Whew.
hadn't happened on my flight, it would have happened probably on the next flight, potentially.
I just remember in the 90s, I used to talk to pilots who were making, I think, 28,000. They started at 23,000. This is in the 90s. And they would have to bunk with other people. They weren't treated very well. They didn't get taken care of. They didn't have good training. And they were not good pilots. It was just their system of training pilots was very limited because the planes basically fly themselves. So they just figured we got to shove someone in the seat. And because I thought about being a pilot in the 90s and I looked into it and started talking to other pilots and they were telling me stories about, how they would party after they got to their place. And it was just a lifestyle that freaked me out. Just, I'm like, pilots get paid less than teachers? Like, what the fuck? I couldn't believe it. I don't know how much they're getting paid now, but that'd be interesting to look into because I don't think they're getting paid very much. Commercial pilots for large airlines.
I always thought they were some of the better paid people around.
I thought that too, but no. If you're a private pilot, you're better paid, but commercial pilots, no.
Median airline pilot salary, according to the Commercial Airline Pilot Salary 2024 ATP Flight School, $211,790.
That's not chicken feed.
Senior captains at established airlines can earn $450,000 per year, according to the same survey.
When did that change, Sam?
This survey was done in 2024. Regional airline pilots in the U.S. typically start out making an hourly rate of $20 to $50 per hour.
It's not very much.
That's regional airline pilots. By year 5, a first officer's hourly rate can reach $130 to $148 per hour. And by year 10, it can reach $212 per hour.
By year 10, but the first year, no.
First year, they said 20 to 50.
That's nothing.
Yeah. It's nothing. You make $20 an hour at McDonald's now in California.
Yeah, so pilots are paid by the hour, not an annual salary, it turns out. Federal law requires them to fly no more than 1,000 hours per year. CNBC reported a salary of $146,600 for airline pilots in 2020. So that's the quick summary. So it appears they do start low, but yeah, then they average 146 by 2020 and higher by now. Seniors at $450K.
How much is a junior software developer? God, I'm just saying, if you compare it to like another job where you don't have to know that much, just 4 years of college.
They start, this is a couple of years ago because we haven't done much hiring in the last couple of years. They typically start between 80 and 90K with a master's out of school. But that was years ago. And that's before the ML craze hit. If you got ML somewhere in your internship or your degree or whatever, I suspect that's going to get bumped by 30 to 50%.
Yeah. When they put the TensorFlow from Google, they put that onto Android phones, I think in 2018. I was telling all the young kids, just learn TensorFlow. I was trying to tell everybody, learn TensorFlow. It's going to do you good in the future.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Cusella flew up to Portland on that Alaska airline flight the time when the CrowdStrike thing happened. So she was sitting in the plane and they couldn't take off for 4 or 5 hours.
Oh my.
I just told her, make sure the guy's not on mushrooms after your story, Sam.
Yeah, there's no
Or
way
the
you can
girl's
tell.
not on mushrooms.
You
Yeah,
can't tell.
there's a big I don't know if it's like taking off, but all these comedians are now doing mushrooms and going up on stage. And it's getting really popular to get high on stage.
The story yesterday about a pilot being arrested, was that a mushroom story or was that a different reason? Yesterday's
I didn't
news,
hear it.
a pilot got arrested on board his plane while it was on the ground in some southwestern city.
These kind of stories make me really see the breakdown in society. Like that Clubhouse app I used to go on, I can't go on that app anymore because it just got taken over. Everyone that was intelligent, I would say 90% of them left. And now it's just people arguing.
Oh, because it just wasn't productive anymore for them?
It was mostly they were on there because of COVID time, and then they found other social things to do because COVID's over.
I see.
And so that group that was meeting is now, they'll pop in once every 6 to 8 months and say hi, but they're working on projects, and a lot of the people are building their own language models and making a lot of money on the internet.
So going back to the guy that tried to shut off the fuel to the engines on my flight, the guy clearly had a problem with mushrooms. But before that, he was suicidal. And before that, it was because I believe he lost his brother. But he couldn't expose that and go to a therapist because if he did, he'd be grounded. Okay, so the way these pilots get treated, if they show any concern from a mental health standpoint, they're immediately grounded. And he wanted to avoid that. That's why he was self-medicating with mushrooms. So it is a systemic problem, you know. You can't look at it as, oh, it's just a mushroom problem. It goes way back. And I don't even know how the brother died or the circumstances, but still, it's more complicated than, oh, he took mushrooms.
Life traumas can have very unpredictable reactions downstream.
But by the way, the guy was very remorseful. After he got sane, he very much regretted, put up no objection to how he was treated, said he was willing to take, whatever justice was going to levy on him. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It was like a public cry for help, committing suicide on a public plane.
There were probably better ways to do it. Yeah.
I think everybody's brain has been hijacked, including mine. I got to stop watching YouTube. I went down a rabbit hole with Aya for the automaton, and then it just started giving me crappy videos of kids playing weird musical instruments. And I just noticed if I watch more than 5 of any video, it'll change the feed.
Yeah.
Yeah. One, actually, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Just to embellish on your point right there, Gail has taken up for the last several weeks this hobby, I guess. She spends her time watching these cases where cops have been abusing their power, either killing people or abusing people or manhandling people where they're, it's not appropriate. And she's been writing a lot of commentary on these YouTube videos. And it's surprising how few of these departments ever respond. Or if they respond, it's just a, form letter. But she's actually getting follow-up from other people who watch these videos, but never really the departments themselves.
Yeah, I started watching those videos and I was wondering, what are these companies doing to get the Freedom of Information Act to get the camera footage and then post it on YouTube? Like there's some sort of, people are making a lot of money with police videos because they're open to the public after a certain amount of time. And if you know how to do that, you can create a really high value YouTube channel of all these police videos.
It's still
It's very
surprising to me
lucrative.
how, even though legally they're required to wear these cameras, how so many device failures happen.
Yep.
Sorry, the camera wasn't working.
Concealing the evidence. This is why you don't trust these quote unquote official reports. They're mudged.
There's a lot of other people recording the police, and there's all sorts of other videos saying this is how you deal with a police officer. And the one that really got my juices flowing, like I didn't know, I felt bad for both people in the situation, was a person wearing an AK-47 walking on a bridge in Florida to go fishing. And the cop came over and said, "You're not allowed to carry that weapon." And he said, "Legally, I am," because the law in that county said he could. So what is the cop supposed to do? Legally, he can carry an AK-47 and just walk around and go fishing because it's a loophole in the law. If it's fish and game, if he's fishing, he can carry a firearm. So there's a guy carrying an assault rifle fishing, and the cop is asking him for his ID, and legally, he doesn't have to give his ID.
Is Florida,
That was the thing that blew my mind.
is it an open carry state? It's even simpler
Was,
than that if it's an open carry state.
I don't know if it was the state or the county, but it was open carry, and he knew his rights because he'd obviously been harassed quite a bit doing that. And he said, "I don't have to give you my ID." And he goes, "Well, I can't let you walk around in public carrying an AK-47 fishing off a bridge." And he goes, "Well, legally you do." And so it was like the cop was wrong. It was one of those situations where the law made the police officer couldn't do his job and the citizen couldn't have his rights. And no one was right in that situation. It was really disturbing.
Antinomy.
Yeah.
Actually, arguably, according to the law, the police officer didn't have a job there to do if he legally was allowed to carry that weapon. And that's how the county evidently wanted it.
But wouldn't you feel terrible if you were the police officer and you didn't ask him some questions or ask for ID or some sort of inquiry, and he just ran around shooting people, then you'd feel like you didn't do your job. So
Interestingly,
it's
they used to be called officers of the peace, right? Keepers of the peace. I think, didn't the
mhm.
Supreme Court say that's not their obligation? They're not obligated to keep the peace. That's one of the
I
strange
don't know
things
that
I've
precedent.
found.
They're not obligated. How can you explain more?
Yeah, this is something that Gil told me that shocked me.
Those videos are very shocking when you watch the altercations with good police officers that are just trying to do their job and citizens that are manipulating the law and just treating the police terribly. And then you start, yeah, go ahead.
Surprisingly, this is easy to find, okay? This is an AI summary of a bunch of articles, but second paragraph says the public duty doctrine has been criticized for leaving individuals vulnerable to harm as, quote, police officers are not legally obligated to protect individuals or prevent harm. This doctrine was reaffirmed in cases such as DeShaney versus Winnebago and Town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, where the Supreme Court ruled that police agencies are not obligated to provide protection to citizens. What the fuck are they there for if they're not supposed to do that? This is makes me incensed.
Yeah,
So
and
what
like
Gail is telling
that's
me is this is being, cited here.
Whole system is rotten.
and like in that school shooting, they were just standing around. They couldn't take out the killer.
Oh, it says police have no specific legal duty to protect individuals unless there is a special relationship between the officer and the individual, such as a person in custody. So the police are not there to protect individuals or prevent harm. That just goes against everything I thought of about policing and why we have police and how much we pay for police, by the way. The police unions are very effective.
So we have bad code that needs to be debugged. Right.
This is the Supreme Court, our corrupt Supreme Court.
Dysfunctional.
Obviously corrupt. Obviously corrupt.
Didn't OIC file articles of impeachment against
AOC, right? That was a couple weeks ago, right?
Alito and
Thomas.
Thomas? Yeah.
I support that. So my specific prompt was, are police officers obligated to keep the peace? That was my prompt.
Well, free speech can be.
Wait, Barry, come on. Doesn't it blow your mind that police officers are not obligated to prevent harm or protect individuals?
Does it blow my mind? No, I'm inured to the dysfunctionality of the system and have been inured to it for 50 years.
Yeah. Hey, Kayla, do you have any influence now that you're part of the community government affiliation or something like that? Can you look into this? Maybe not.
It's also
Waste
very
of
local
time.
level stuff. Go ahead, Kayla.
Yeah, I could look into the local level stuff.
Kayla, save us. Save us from this system.
It's not the Andy Griffith show anymore.
Yeah.
I met most of the local politicians this past week, and I have yet to meet, I think, the VA. I met our tax person too.
Is the police department represented in any of those meetings?
Oh yeah, there's always chief of police. There's always, I have the phone number too, so I have their personal cell phone number, but
Yeah. Did you already know
Yeah.
this, or did this surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, and I did know this um, in an unfortunate way. The knowledge came to me at an unfortunate time. So, and um, also the parents that we deal with too, they've got lots of cases where unfortunately the police, their hands were tied in a million different ways.
Hmm.
But yeah, they're not obligated.
So evidently, there have been multiple affirmations of this principle. Police have no duty to protect you.
Yeah, too much.
I always
There's
knew
too
that,
much at
Sam,
risk.
but I grew up in a bad neighborhood, so I was quite
All right,
aware.
all right, all right, all right. Let me turn this question around. Why do we have police then?
Because we have laws.
It's a stupid question, I
to,
know,
to,
but
enf-
why do we have police?
to
To
enforce the law.
babysit.
We have laws that can be enforced.
It's revenue
Not,
for the city, all the speeding tickets.
well, do you want to get deep into the history of America and police officers
It's
being
based on
enforcing?
slavery. I know that.
It is, you know that. So
I
what are
know
you
this.
asking? You know it's based on slavery. Did slavery go away? No, they just freed all the slaves and let them still be slaves to the system. And slavery never went away. I hate. I mean, you could talk to any of your black friends. Go talk to your black friends. They'll tell you slavery never went away. There's a reason why we had a Black Lives Matter movement because every black person in America knows that they might not be a slave, quote unquote, of property and chattel and owned by someone,
Yeah,
but they are also not free in the system.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the
That's just,
system. Is it not to deviate the conversation or anything, but when I went to Canada, it was really interesting. One of Damien's friends told me, we were comparing the diversity from Canada to the United States, and I just loved people watching. So I was asking about the Africans there, and they said, "Oh, they're mostly from Ghana or Somalia, or from different parts of Africa." And he goes, "Well, what about the Africans in the United States?" I said, "Oh, they're mostly from, slaves. I don't know, just African American, unfortunately." And so he said, "Well, if there's racism against African Americans in the United States, there's racism against the indigenous, which is the Native Americans in Canada. So it's the system all around." I mean, we're focused, of course, hyper focused on the United States because this is where we're from, but it's really sad and a little interesting that it's just all over the world. Somebody even mentioned Australia, how just a couple of years ago, not a couple of years, but a lot more recently, the indigenous in Australia were finally getting recognized, finally getting help, but they were heavily, what is that word? My words, my mommy brain is so bad this year. Discriminated against. I mean, it was just in the observation that this person made was incredible. They're just like, yeah, their discrimination was really bad. It was really harsh. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't tell you about the system.
I was going to say just a little anecdote. I know everyone knows this, but it's kind of shocking is the town that I went to, and it's called Ojai, California. And there's 5, 6, 7 generations of Mexicans, and they cannot stand the Mexicans that just came to the United States because they were there when it was, when it was still Spanish. I mean, these are old generations, and they're racist. They hate Mexicans, and they're Mexican technically, but they hate
And not just in
Mexicans. Like
Ohio.
they were more racist than, yeah, I'm just saying in California, in a lot of places, they're more racist than people that are not Mexican. It's and then it also goes back to there's different parts of Mexico. There, it's a huge country. So people from one region hate the people from another region. So they're not all one people is what I'm trying to say. And same thing with, I think, all cultures, like my African American friends, some of them hate the people from, say, Haiti or the Caribbean or Jamaica. They just don't relate to those people. They don't have the same experiences. And it's not,
And all
yeah.
Asians hate each other.
Well, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to bring that part up. But I'm just saying, just like white, I mean, there's Jews and there's Protestants. They're very different people, but in the eyes of most Black or Asian people, they're just white. Like I'm just a white person to most of my Black friends. They don't see me as any kind of individual person. I'm just white.
Now, is Kamala the union of all races in one person?
He has a Jewish husband too.
So I'm just,
Yeah.
no,
She might have a Jewish vice president.
she's an Indian American who's Black when it suits her.
Okay.
Well, isn't she from Jamaica?
Culturally, she's an Indian American, though, right?
Well, I think her father is from Jamaica.
Well, her dad
She
was,
is
but
Black.
she wasn't raised by her dad.
Her mother is from India. Her father's, well, her mother was a doctor, and her father is a professor at Stanford, I think, something like that.
Yeah, but does race really matter? I mean, honestly,
She
it was funny because
raised with an Indian mom, and wasn't raised by her Black dad.
my son, I was just asking him out of passing because he was actually the one who told me that Kamala Harris was running. We were in Banff, so he was telling me, he's like, "Oh, Kamala Harris is going to run for president," and I was like, "Oh, what?" So yesterday I asked him, "So what do you think of that?" And he's like, "Well, she's better than Biden and she's better than Trump, so there's that."
And I think tomorrow
I love that.
Tomorrow we'll find out who she picks for her VP.
Oh, go ahead.
Might be Shapiro from Pennsylvania, possibly.
I hope it's AOC.
Oh, I don't think so.
I doubt it.
First of
I
all,
know.
I think they said it's going to be a white male. I think that's for sure. It's a white male.
Yeah, this is what's so ridiculous. It's like, why? Because he's like, race really does matter in the political circle. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
I
the
even
voters.
told my boss, I said that you probably weren't chosen for the VCLA because you're white. I just straight up told her that. And because she goes, you're gonna get it. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm probably the only,
What do they call that? Identity politics?
Yeah.
yeah. That blows my mind. I'm like, yeah, I'll probably get it.
So is that driven by the media? I don't know. How did we get back to this after Martin Luther King and everything? Diversity.
I think it's just the representation, they're kind of banking on, if we diversify, hopefully the diversification is an educated decision. That's why what's his name was out of the running originally. Barry Sanders.
Yeah. Jewish systems thinker is totally disqualified for being a Jewish systems thinker.
Religion too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get going soon. Just it's almost 1.
Yeah. 11 minutes to the top of the second hour here.
Yep.
So before you go, I just want to say that the representation in this room is quite diverse, and I think we represent America. So
God help us.
So we all go onto a moon colony and we see who survives.
It's hard to blame them. Not a bad thing.
All right. On that note, have a good
be
day.
well, Eric.
Yep,
Cheers.
see ya.
Yeah, I like the diversity in America. I think I think the rest of the world, I've been watching Australian news and they just think we're hilarious. Like the news in
Oh yeah.
Australia, they go what lefties say now or something. They have this segment now for our segment, what lefties say now. Wow, there's new pronouns, and they just think it's hilarious.
I came across DEI as an acronym or abbreviation, and I asked Gemini what it stood for, and it says, I'm not allowed to tell you. It's too sensitive.
Is that what it said?
It says it's too political. Like I'm not allowed to discuss political stuff, but
Wow.
it's
My
diversity,
son's
equity, and inclusion it stands for.
my son's 19-year-old Canadian friend said that definitely the politicians in the United States are a lot more entertaining.
Yeah,
That was a
my friend
funny
in
way of looking at it.
Cyprus, he thinks we're like my friend in Cyprus, like, you love the Trump? You love the Trump, huh? Huh? Habibi, you love the Trump? I'm like, wait, what? Like, it's not a TV show. This is our lives. This is like, he's like, not for me. I live
Yeah,
in Cyprus.
I know it's like a little offensive when you hear it, and then you're like, oh, I guess if you look at it from that way, it is a little
Hmm.
embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing.
It's certainly a test for the love your enemy ethic from Christianity.
Don't talk to me about Christianity.
Uh-oh, Q and Sam. And you got your coffee.
I'm caffeinated now.
Yeah, if you ever become a Mormon or a born again Christian, let me know.
Oh, I was Mormon once.
But you can
Do you
become a
have any
secular
questions?
believer in the teachings of historical systems thinkers who were giving guidance before systems thinking was a term of art or a discipline.
Yeah.
Wait, Kayla, did you actually get to be a Mormon far enough that you actually got the what, pajamas?
I did not get the pajamas, but I did go through the you know, uh I get dunked in the water. I went through the whole religious ceremony. It was actually quite nice. I have to say that when I was Mormon, um, I actually had a lot more money than I do now. I mean, in hindsight, I obviously didn't have as much as I didn't make as much as I make not now, but I was saving a lot of money and I was eating pretty healthy too. There were things about the Mormon church that I did enjoy.
Were you tithing 10%?
Yes, I was. And I got my own tax deductible. I don't know. The church actually has their own tax person. So every
Nice.
year
I
around
like that.
taxes, yeah, they go into church and they do their tax. At least that aspect of it, which was really kind of interesting.
Well, they have multiple purposes there, right? They want to know that you're actually doing 10% also, right?
Yeah, I have to say this, I did not feel the 10% at all. But there are other things that compensated for it. For instance, there was, I think, Monday was like family day, and us singles, obviously you didn't have, family or what we didn't call our nucleus family. So we all got together and played games and, cooked for each other. So there were things like that. Sunday, of course, was the day of rest. So we would just, after 4 hours of church, that's what I didn't like, the 4 hours of church. And then, we would have a home cooked meal and then we would not go anywhere, spend any money or anything like that. So there were compensations for it, which I think is fantastic. I think that's great. And I do have to say that when I was being um, psychologically abused by my ex-boyfriend, when I did go to church and ask for help, they gave me help without any questions asked. The pastor like went into the cabinet and gave me a few extra $100 and said, "Here, just take it, you know, and come back in and check in with us." And I wasn't even a part of the church then. I had already kind of excommunicated, but I didn't know where to go. So they helped me.
She doesn't disclose this very much, but Gail also went through, I guess, a year or two of Wednesday Bible study with some Mormon elders, and then actually got baptized into the Mormon church here. And then after that, she felt like she was very actively recruited to become part of, I don't know what they call it, but it's a get together that's just the women. And
Uh-huh.
they want to do social things, but she thought, it may not be the case, but she thought that she was being groomed to meet single Mormon men. And
Yes.
that was very much a part of that culture, she felt.
The Mormon
Yeah.
hookup.
They used to laugh because they would have like this book, in the church, and you take pictures. It's kind of like a yearbook, yeah. And it just shows you everybody that's in your, I forgot what they call it, in your sector or whatnot. And
Ward. She
they
called it
used
the
to say,
ward.
yes, the singles word. They'd be like, okay, here you go. You're going to be shopping for a boyfriend or something. I was like, ew, really? And so we girls would giggle over the pictures and be like, oh, and that they would tell me, who's cool and who's not.
That Mormon Facebook? What's that called?
Yeah. More book.
A Lorne? More book? I think there's benefits to community. If it wasn't based around religions, like I watch Cusella works in unions, and it's amazing how they help each other out in those unions. And that all the
Mm-hmm.
unions of other unions get together, meet, and talk about negotiating with their different union. Like they're all trying to get the best deal for all their people, whether it be restaurant management or healthcare or whatever union they're in, transportation. They all meet up, and it's amazing. They go to these giant conferences and compare notes and give lectures and learn from each other how to get
That's
the
what
best deals.
politicians should do.
I think they
That's what I
do
was
actually.
thinking. Do
Don't they?
they?
Isn't that what Congress and the Senate is? Is they all meet up and
I was gonna say, don't say that. I
well,
know
I
what
mean
that is,
that's
but like
you're
community, like
technically yeah, you go to Washington DC and you have this little club called DC and y'all meet up and then you go back to your states and
no, I was thinking of a more local level, a lot more casual, not,
yeah.
these weird formal, the weird formal stuff is great, but there should be kind of a community, very casual way to get
Yeah.
together too.
Well, I did join the Rotary Club for a while and helped them put on those wine auctions and stuff like that, and worked with the Better Business Bureau and tried to do it at the local level when I was in Santa Barbara. And
Did you
there's,
like it?
I did. It was really fun. I did a lot of the work though. I felt like a peasant. I felt like I was rising up the ranks as a peasant to get into the good graces of the people with power. So I had to serve wine at one of them, and then I had to do cold calling. And it was just I was doing all the work because I was young. So
Mm.
if I stayed in that for 25 years, I'm sure I'd have a mansion on top of the hill in Montecito somewhere. But I like there was lectures and I like people coming. There were some great lectures on China back in the 90s. They were talking about what China is going to be as a superpower in the future, and they were dead on accurate. It became exactly what they said. They were showing the big dam project in the 90s in China for the Yangtze River and what that would do for their trade and how that would bring the country up. And it's going to reshape China and turn them into a superpower. And it did. Uh, yeah, I think everything works off of group think and group power. And the stronger your group is, the more you can lobby. And I've been hearing rumors of digital nations being started. It's not a sci-fi fantasy, but they're really trying to start new countries on the internet. So you can be part of a newly formed company digitally. And that's fast forward 30 years and there'll be people that belong to metaverse or something. I don't know what this country is going to be called.
Oh yeah, and then our
Metastan.
kids are going to be a part of it.
Maybe if they
They're already
join, I don't
doing
know.
something like that.
Yeah. I think the kids have their own communities that are hundreds of thousands large with these video games.
Hmm.
Like, didn't you say, Kayla, your son met someone that he played video games with in real life?
Yeah, actually, he's already met a good handful of them, you know. Um,
Hmm.
let's see, when we were in Colorado, he met two of them. I was highly skeptical. I'm like, "Oh, these better not be 40-year-old men, pulling up a black van." So, thankfully that just eased my mind. I even talked to one of the moms and we were laughing about, is this like the smartest thing we've ever done as mothers? But then when we went to Canada, the reason why we went to Edmonton is to meet a good, half dozen of his online friends there who ended up being just these nerdy guys. And it was great. They were 100% safe. Um, it was amazing just to see the connections that he made with his online friends. But then again, he actually has a good, sense of character. He is yeah, he's a systems thinker. I forgot what my ex-husband said about him, his way of thinking. He's super smart.
Nice.
Cool.
So yeah, it was really cool. I mean, you guys, hey, I met Sam and you. I've yet to meet Barry in person.
Should we all go bum rush Barry?
Yeah, we should all
We'll go grab you, Barry, take you out of the house.
We're going to
go.
charter
That's
a Boeing
right.
737, Barry. We're going to go to we'll get
Yeah,
you
I
to
just
your apartment.
watched. I was going to say my nephew just won a robotics competition. Cusella's nephew is 8 years old, but he's quite the science nerd. He won some science competitions, and then him and his little friend just won a robotics competition at summer camp. They
Nice.
built a robot that has spikes on the outside and spikes on the inside, so it was defeating all the other robots by pushing back and forth. So
Did
he's
you say that you can go to those robot conventions?
Yeah, they've
which
been
ones?
happening annually for quite a while.
Yeah, my sister and I want to go. So it's not like invite only, you can actually go.
Oh, it's a public event. Yeah.
Hmm.
I forget what it's
I think
called. I think it's
that's.
Robot Wars or something like that.
Did you guys see the Omniverse that was showed off? I think it was at SeaGraph this week. The training
No.
environments for the humanoid robots. I think it's getting quite popular. Humans training robots in the virtual space.
No.
Uh, I just started taking apart Aya's old toys when she was a baby, and we're unscrewing everything. She loves to. I bought her a screwdriver that you can just press the button and it unscrews. And so we're taking apart, and I'm taking a page out of your book, Barry, is upcycling her old toys that would get thrown away, but they have cool electronics in them. So we're taking the electronics out, the speakers and the motherboards, and it's fun. Little sensors. And then that way, when she's a couple more years older, she can take those pieces and put it together to make stuff. I'm going to save on electronic parts in a year or so.
Okay, Kayla, I found it. It's called BattleBots.
BattleBots?
BattleBots. Yeah, here's the link. It was not Robot Wars, but you can find it using Robot Wars, but it's BattleBots.
Is that still a television show somewhere?
Yeah, yeah. And they have regional things as well. My son was involved in that when he was in middle school. That was decades ago.
Oh man. Hosted at a Long Beach Pyramid in Long Beach, 1999.
There you go.
Hmm.
I just watched plans to make robots out of Altoid kins. Like you cut a little hole in the Altoid tin, and then you put legs in there and let them walk around. So it's just four actuators.
Have you ever seen the videos on strand beasts? These are these contraptions that are wind powered and they walk on the beach and
Those are phenomenal. Those
yeah,
are really, really clever.
they're very, very complex. There's one guy who's been doing it for like 50 years. But go into YouTube and put in strand beasts, STRANDBEESTS, because it's the Norwegian spelling.
I've seen that, Barry, and I also been noticing the 3D printing world is really taking off lately.
Yeah,
The prices of 3D printers have dropped, and people are making larger, complex things from little, small $600 3D printers,
yeah.
building it in pieces and then using resin to attach epoxy to attach the pieces. So you can, it takes forever. You got to print up, it's like 500 to 600 hours of printing.
Boy,
But then all those pieces are so intricately,
yeah. The
yeah,
machine,
you can make those
actually,
robots
not
that
machine
walk on the
printed.
beach.
Can't even say they're machine because they're not machine, they're printed.
They're plastics that move. I just saw a guy make
Okay,
a surfboard out of a little 3D printer and he just did little squares. Are you leaving, Caleb?
yeah, I gotta go.
I didn't hear what you said.
Happy Sunday.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers.
Next time. Bye-bye.
Happy Sunday. Do either of you have a 3D printer? Do you have one at that fix-it shop, Barry?
I
No,
do.
we don't have anything like that.
Okay.
I'm not even sure we could use it because
Yeah.
you have to also have what do you call it, the design software to go with it.
The
Yeah, they
cat.
come with the software. The bamboo one is the cheap one. Yeah, the CAD drawings, they come with their own proprietary, but you can import the community of CAD drawings.
You know, you have to sort of be expert in CAD technology, and they have to have the computers that can do CAD and all that stuff. And we don't really have the space for that kind of stuff. That's a pretty big operation and specialty.
Well, let me know if you get into it. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I'm getting close.
I think it's unlikely. I mean, I hardly even use ordinary paper printers anymore. So.
Yeah. I just want to save money on toys for Aya. As she's getting older, I can see her like, oh, let me get that toy. Like the last one, that toy robot.
Well, how much are the supplies? I mean, like the materials, the plastics or the molds or, the actual raw material that you use to print with. I don't even know that.
Spools, and there's spools of colored plastic, but I don't know what they cost per meter. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
depends on the color they have and the materials. If if you get the colored ones, it costs more than the gray or the black ones, the white. But yeah, it's interesting. Oh, the robotics age. We're here now.
Brave New World. Sabine
Did-
Hostetler was arguing whether these machines are conscious. She says that the chatbots aren't, but the embodied robots are, because the embodied robots have to have a self model, which they are using to regulate their athletics. But the chatbots don't have to have a self model.
Speaking on Sabine, she's stirred up quite a stir in the physics community, and now Sean Carroll is running around doing a tour to bring some sanity into string theory and M theory and physics because everyone is
She
in a
doesn't really
tizzy because of.
she doesn't cover string theory. At least I don't think she does.
There's a famous video of her calling out the string theorists.
Well, string theory has been going for 50 years and hasn't gotten anywhere. It hasn't
That's
achieved.
that's the problem, and that's why Sean Carey is on the string theory apology tour.
And even Brian Greene has hosted World Science Festival episodes on string theory, going, you know, where is string theory? Why hasn't it gotten anywhere? And he's a string theorist, but he's the first to admit that it really hasn't achieved any breakthroughs.
Yeah. I just listened to a really good podcast with Kurt Jaimunger and Sean Carroll debating this issue and saying the strengths and weaknesses of string theory.
Yeah, I think people are kind of slowly losing faith that it's going to ever, um, yield anything. But there was a new episode of World Science Festival just 2 days ago, um, on trying to meld general relativity with quantum mechanics, and some experiments that are trying to hybridize the two theories. It's really about the two Einstein Podolsky Rosen papers, the EPR and the EP, and that they're, even though they seem to be unrelated, they're very deeply related. And so they did an episode. They just published an episode 2 days ago on that.
I think the new discoveries, did you see the thing on dark oxygen that's going around the news?
I saw a headline, but I haven't read the stories.
It's a place in the ocean where there's metallic rock that has a small, tiny voltage that's creating oxygen.
Oh yeah, yeah, sort of electrochemical process that's non-biological. But it's
Yeah, I think
basically a battery, a natural,
pretty much a natural.
just
Yeah,
ore with different metals that have separated and form a current that can dissociate seawater, I guess.
yeah, I think the more we understand what's under the ocean and out in space, we'll start to understand physics better, because the physics on Earth is different than physics in the universe.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are materials on the planet in the biosphere that don't exist in environments where there's no biosphere.
Exactly. And that's the magnetic structure around the Earth is one physics, but on the moon is different, and on other planets, I think. Imagine if we ever get to some of the moons on Jupiter. Or
I want to get to some of these lakes, frozen lakes, where they think below the surface there might be some conditions that could support metabolism of some variety.
yeah,
I think eventually we will find either current evidence or historical evidence that cellular life does exist or did exist at one time on maybe Mars and or some of the moons of the large planets. I don't know if I'll live to see that or see the evidence of that.
I don't think that's the most exciting thing.
It isn't. I mean, so all right, so, because we know that stuff gets ejected and land on the, stuff from Mars lands on the Earth and vice versa. So presumably it could have carried monocellular stuff that might have survived. But so what?
I just want to live long enough to where they're doing massive desalination plants and pumping water to the top of this Sequoia mountain range going up California, and replenishing all of the desert in the Mojave.
Oh, yeah.
And like imagine they're just pumping water out of the ocean and all of Italy goes down a little bit. That would be really cool. I'd like to live long enough to see a global shift in tides from the ocean of that massive desalination.
I'm hoping to see some breakthroughs in energy production, especially solar energy production.
Yeah.
Battery.
Well, they did. Oh, they just had a breakthrough in batteries at the Tesla company this week.
Well, I had seen that story.
It's they bought Maxwell Technologies about 7, 8 years ago to do dry cell, and they could never crack the dry cell for massive manufacturing, and they just cracked it last week.
Okay. One of the very first battery packs that was created back in the early days, it totally sealed and it's still active, and they really don't know how it works because they're afraid, they don't want to take it apart because it's historic. But it's
wow.
years old and it's still producing current.
And what is the makeup of it?
Well, that's the whole point. I think either Volta or one of those guys built it. and it's a couple hundred years old, and they don't, because the whole thing is sort of packaged up and they don't want to dismantle it. They don't really know what its architecture is.
Would you send me that link? I would love to read about that. I've never heard
I'll
of
have
that.
to find the link because I just remember seeing the story months ago. If I can find the
Yeah.
story.
If you find it, please shoot it over because I am absolutely fascinated by this next layer. I've heard so many possibilities of what could be created, but then it's all about lithium refining
Yeah.
at large scale, and the new lithium refinement places in Texas that are going up, and the ones that are in, I think, Peru. If if they can get lithium refining to be 30 to 40% more efficient, that would change everything. So uh, I gotta go.
All righty. I guess we're done then.
Cheers.
Sam, if you're still
Okay, Barry.
Sam, if you're still on, I think we're done.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Take
Cheers,
care.
Sam. Bye, Barry.
Bye-bye.